in-person event changed, and then on a dime, they changed this entire thing for us so that we can still connect today. So if you haven't realized how amazing they all are, let's just do that right now and with our collective virtual applause, because I can only imagine how much work they've put behind this. So, but thank you all so much for coming to the session today on Wild Pedagogy, the wild edge of environmental education. And this is a topic that's become very exciting to me, and it's a place that I'm thinking there is a lot of potential in the coming years for the field of environmental education. But before we jump into that, I want to introduce myself a little bit here. My name is Deb Matlock, and I am the founder and director of an organization called Wild Rhythms. And I have been involved in the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Ed for about 20 or so years, maybe a little bit more, on numerous committees, including the board, and I'm a past board president. I think that we are so fortunate in Colorado to have this organization. It's a leader in the country and a big time contributor on the national levels as well. I also spent many years working for the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks Department with all the awesome educators up there. And I also work with Prescott College as the Environmental Education Program Coordinator, working with graduate students who are pursuing environmental ed. This particular topic, Wild Pedagogies, is also forming the basis of another piece that I'm working on, which is as I'm working on my doctoral dissertation in environmental education. And after I discovered Wild Pedagogies, which I'm going to tell you how that happened in a second, I realized I needed to completely change the foundation of my entire research project. So when you think about taking a nature hike and you start at the trailhead and you're walking through and you have no idea what you're going to find around each corner or behind a rock, or this is kind of how Wild Pedagogies has shown up for me personally. It was kind of like being on that nature hike into the field of environmental education. So how I found this, it was about 1.5 years ago. I was at the North American Association for Environmental Ed conference in Spokane. And it had been a long week. I had been there for the research symposium and the conference. It was like day 6 and I was exhausted. My introvert was ready to be not extroverting anymore, you know, and there was one session on the very last day in the very last chunk of time. And it was a 10-minute spotlight session. It was called Wild Pedagogies. What was it? Renegotiating education in the Anthropocene. So I thought, Wild Pedagogies, what is that? Renegotiating education. I just could not let it go. And so even that day I was packed up and thought I could just stay in the hotel room until the shuttle gets here. I'm so tired. But I was like, I have to go to this presentation. So I go to the presentation and I walk in, and Dr. Bob Dickling, who is one of the founders of this work, was doing his presentation and sharing about his book, which I will talk about quite a lot today, but it's called Wild Pedagogies, and I'll be sending you all a link where you can find it. He started to speak about what this work is and what it brings together in terms of environmental ed, and I started to get chills. I could not believe, my heart was racing. I was starting to get kind of jittery. I was so excited. I felt like I am listening to somebody speaking, articulating a language that I have been trying in my own career to put words to and to put some sort of structure to, and to understand in a way that I wasn't able to. So I run up after his little spotlight presentation. I buy the book, I introduce myself, and head off to the airport, where I'm digging into this book. So I'm flying over Idaho, the beautiful Rocky Mountains underneath me, and I'm reading this book, and I'm getting more and more excited. I almost turned to the poor guy next to me and said, okay, you probably don't know how cool this is that I'm reading this right now. I mean, I thought I was gonna, you know, hyperventilate. So this is why I'm so excited to share this with the Colorado community today. That trip, that meeting with a gentleman at NAAE had led to an invitation for me to join an international research symposium last August in Norway, where there were 30 of us from 8 different countries coming together to deeply dig into wild pedagogies and what does it mean, what can it be, how do we even do this? And so I'm looking forward to sharing as well some experiences from that with you all today. So before we go any further, we've got to talk about what in the heck are we even talking about? What is wild pedagogy? So I'm going to share the whiteboard, and what I'd like to do is have you all just kind of yell out to me or put in the chat, which, all right, let me just get this little tech thing going. When you hear the phrase wild pedagogy, what are the words and ideas that come to mind for you? Let me get my chat window up. Okay, I've got the chat window. I have the whiteboard. I think we can function now. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself and yell it out, or feel free to write it in chat, and I will try to capture these for us to see. Outside, untamed, awesome. Engaging, experiential, and there will be some spelling errors, and that just makes this all the more fun. Freedom, adventure, messy, getting messy. Playing undirected. Excellent. Let me see. Let me roll up here and see if I missed any other ones. Going with your urges. Exploration. Awesome. Curiosity. Ah. No, if we were in person, I would still have spelling errors on the whiteboard because that's what happens. I've noticed it's like, there's no way around it. Learning and teaching through observation and exploration, using wilderness to design curriculum. Okay. Oops, I went somewhere place. Okay. Spontaneous. So I would encourage you, as we're going through this session today, to be thinking, as we're talking, what other words come up for you? What other words come to mind when you think of wild pedagogies, when you think of that sense of wild? Essentially, the definition of wild pedagogies that's currently in place is that it is about rewilding education. The idea that reforming education might just not be enough. And rewilding is one of those phrases that I'm very excited to see making quite a headway in the world academically. It's in titles, it's in workshop titles. It's a really important word. I feel like it's one of those words that forms the root of what we might really need culturally is a rewilding. Thinking of rewilding education. One of the ways that Wild Pedagogies proposes to do this is by re-examining our relationships with places, landscapes, more than human beings in the wild. So I read this, okay, that's what environmental ed does, I get it, and it is. And I think of what I've learned about wild pedagogies and what we're gonna share today is that it's almost like place connection on steroids. It's like taking those ideas of reimagining our relationship with places and going one more level. How do we really engage with a place? How do we communicate with the places and the animals? How do we really ask the questions of what does it mean to be human in this world? And I don't know about you all, but I can tell you this question for me has lit up like a firecracker the last 2 to 3 weeks. Everything that I've spent my time in my career talking about connection and all these things, the question of really what does it mean to go forward as a human when all of our human institutions are being incredibly challenged and our physical health as well. Another component of wild pedagogies is that it says that the way that we renegotiate this humanness, the way that we get at understanding that is most profoundly done through educational practices. So this spoke to my heart as well. Big bias I have here is that environmental education is one of the most important things we can do. It's sort of like, in my mind, it's like we've got this river, beautiful rippling water and the rocks, and then the substrate that forms that river is where environmental education lives. It is what everything else rests on. Every amazing medical innovation, every piece of art, every incredible experience that we have as a human exists in our environment. And so if we say to ourselves, these educational practices are really where it's at for us to really ask these deep questions. What does it mean to be human? What is our relationship with the rest of the world? What we're really saying is this work is ground zero important. This is the centerpiece of importance right now. And the last sort of philosophical tenet of wild pedagogies is that we are in an era called the Anthropocene. Now, I don't know if this is a familiar term, but if you have any ideas what that might mean, feel free to toss it into the chat. Anthro, human, Scene, so we've got all that geologic epoch. So the Anthropocene is one name, which some agree with, some don't, that we're moving into a geologic era where human activity is the dominant force. So yeah, Jay wrote, era of time largely influenced by humans, exactly. So that is what Some scholars and some scientists are saying that they are referring to the next era. There is controversy around that term. Others say we don't want, humans are never going to be the dominant force because we are always going to be as part of the natural world, and we are seeing a bit of that today. So just to put that out there. But for the sake of this discussion, Wild Pedagogies has positioned itself to say we need to renegotiate the role of education in the Anthropocene. What role does it have? What is our role as environmental educators if we're moving into an era that is so influenced by humans, that we are impacting so many other natural processes? And I thought this is a really profound question. 25 years ago when I started my environmental ed career, this wasn't the question I was asking. I was asking the question of, how do we get people to care? How do we get people to feel connected? How do we get people to learn about the land and want to be respectful? And as time has gone on and as we've emerged as a field and we've become better and better at what we do, we've got to also keep asking these big questions. And what is the role of environmental education as we move forward into the Anthropocene, I think is one of the most important questions we can ask. So before we get into the fun, I'm going to show you the website for Wild Pedagogies. I want to make sure that you know that questions are welcome at any point. I'm going to leave a big chunk of time for discussion and questions at the end. But please, if something is burning as you're going, stick it in the chat or unmute yourself and just yell at me, and we can answer as you go. I know sometimes questions get lost in conversation, so definitely don't feel like you have to do that. The other thing I would encourage you to do as we get into the nuts and bolts of the framework of Wild Pedagogies is thinking of your own work, thinking of the way that you, either where you work, the kind of work you do, the way you want to work, and start to sort of match up overlays. Where do you feel like you're already doing some of these components, and where might you want to add some more pieces? So if you start having that lens now, you may be able to end this session with a little bit of a toolbox, a little bit of a next step for yourself about how to kind of embrace and bring in more of the rewilding of the education process for yourself. If you're thinking about, we may, if we end up with a big discussion at the end, we also may move into breakout room. So we'll see where you all want to take this, because I want to make sure this is meeting your needs. So if we need to chat, we'll do it. If we think about, okay, so the human relationship with the earth is not sustainable. That's one of the bases of wild pedagogy. It's not sustainable. We've seen it. We've got some challenges going on big and small scales. If we think about education as a necessary partner, like we just talked about, change the way that humans are with the world, it all sounds well and good. And sitting, on the airplane 30,000 feet above the beautiful Rocky Mountains in Idaho, I was like, oh yes, oh yes. But then I was quickly following that with, but how? What does this mean? And how is this different than what I'm already doing? How is this different? Is it different? So to explore that, I will say that Wild Pedagogies has sort of divided itself into 6 touchstones. And we'll go through each one of those. But I also want to say that this body of work is well acknowledged to be birthing itself. It's on the website, you'll see when we go there that they're asking for your ideas, your critiques, your applications of this. So the exciting thing right now is that this is a body of work that you can all become part of. If it resonates with you and you start wanting to play with it, we all need to put our heads together to say, are these the right touchstones? Is this the right way to do this? How do we reimagine ourselves in education moving forward? This is not the brain work of 30 people in one little town in Norway last fall. This is the brain work of all of environmental education and everybody who's passionate about this. So I want to go back to the whiteboard for a second, because now we're going to get, oh, it saves everything. Okay. I want to tell you what these 6 touchstones are first, and then we will go into each one. So there are 6 touchstones. I'll just go with number 1 is nature as co-teacher. So if you're thinking about nature as co-teacher, we're thinking about us not being located as the educator alone, us going out there and facilitating experience for the earth to teach. Okay, we've been hearing about that in environmental ed for a while. That's not necessarily new. what I've learned about wild pedagogy is that this is going deeply in. It's about really honestly letting the place be the first teacher. It's about really honestly saying, we have to step back from a human-centered approach. We have to step back from saying, we are here to learn about, and instead say, we are here to learn with. And we have to step back from saying, we are the experts here to save the place, and move into, we are part of this place working together. That's the premise of the first one, and we're going to dig more deeply into these. The second touchstone is an honoring of complexity, the unknown, and spontaneity. And I know spontaneity came up in our list of words. Okay, well, spontaneous is easier to spell for me at this moment. So we're going to use that. This one, I have to be honest, can be hard. I have been in a lot of educational situations where, you know, we were on a really strict timeline. We had very specific standards we were working towards. We had certain goals we had to meet. So the challenge for this one is saying to leave room for the surprise. This is like the teachable moment in environmental ed where we talk about, oh, I wasn't planning on that bear walking across the trail. But it's more than that. It's how do we really leave room, challenge the idea of needing to control education and control experience, and instead invite this natural emergence of experience between people and place. So I have been playing with this touchstone since learning about this body of work, and I realized that even though I thought I was being very open to these things in the past, I was still really trying to control things beyond the needs of safety and certain things that, of course, we have to control. This is a fun one to dig into and challenge. Where did I think, when I was looking, where is my control issue within my environmental education programming? And acknowledging that I actually had one, because I wanted things to go a certain way, you know, and having to push the edges of that. So the third touchstone is locating the wild. And the idea here is that wild is everywhere, nature is everywhere. Recognizing this and finding it and really feeling it is not always easy. And so wild can be kind of blurred over by things like cultural tools or locations where we don't feel that it's that wild, or you know, in some cases, the idea that we can't get out of a classroom and we're sitting in a room or a ballroom where there's no windows. I've done some presentations over the years in ballrooms with no windows and, you know, fluorescent lights, and yet we're here to talk about environmental and nature connection. And so the idea here is to challenge ourselves as educators to say, in this space, without saying, I wish it was different, where is the wildness? How do I find it, and how do I open that door for my participants? And number 4 is time and practice. This one gets at the idea that to change our relationship, find a place to open up to that more than human interaction and teaching, to be available for figuring out what wildness means to each one of us, there has to be time for those more expansive encounters. It's interesting, I look back in my career from the beginning, and I used to plan my environmental education programs, I mean, to the T. Plan A, plan B, plan C, I mean, way, way, way too much control issue for me there, going back up to the unknown number 2. And what I've learned over time is that it is time. It is allowing space that I've seen the most transformative things happen on my programs. And when we were in Norway doing the Wild Pedagogy Intensive, what I learned this on a whole new level, because we had 8 days together, stuck in a remote part of Norway where we weren't going to be leaving. I wouldn't say stuck, but where we were, there were not, it was us and the beautiful landscape. And so time, you know, a 9-hour hike turned into some incredible ideas and paper ideas and research ideas and program ideas in ways that we would have never dreamed 9 hours earlier when we started. Of course, a 9-hour hike isn't going to be realistic for all of our programming. But asking ourselves, where is the time? Where can I open up for people to have their own intuition, their own experience? And can I work against the cultural norms that say not to value that? that say we need the productivity, we need the demonstration of knowledge. How do we work with that? So number 5 is the socio-cultural change. So as I was just sort of mentioning there, a lot of the reasons we have difficulty finding the wild and making the time and space and embracing complexity and spontaneity, even acknowledging that the more than human world has a voice and can teach with us, a lot of that rests in the cultural component. So a big piece of this is that the way humans exist on this planet, if that needs changing, then that has to happen at a cultural level. To me, this is an exciting piece of wild pedagogy because it brings in all of the diversity of humanity on this planet. This isn't one person or one culture. This is all of us saying where we are, what are the changes that we need to make in those places and with those cultures, and how can we be part of that? And that education as a profound cultural changer is a really, really poignant place for these changes to happen. You know, education is the place where it's not accusatory, it's not punitive, it's inspiring and opening. So cultural change. And the last one is building alliances and the human community. So this one is really about saying, okay, none of this work happens in a vacuum. None of this work happens without the human communities involved. You know, I think many of us here on this call have done work in situations where communities were telling us what we needed to do, what kind of educational programming they wanted at their nature center or at their open space department, or how they were using a landscape with saying this is the kind of education this community is needed here. Another piece to this one, which is what does community mean, and not having it rest just in the human, but really, really pushing the edge of community to mean all of life. And so whether we're looking at a community in a town or a watershed or a larger region or the entire world, really consciously in all of our educational programming, thinking of ourselves as using community and referring to community and building community in a way that is human and beyond human. But those are the 6 touchstones. And when we were talking about this deeply in Norway, and I was learning from the people who had envisioned this work, they were very clear to say, these may not be the right touchstones. In 5 years, we may have different ones, or these will be more developed. So this is where, as a practitioner, going out and using wild pedagogy and reading about it and seeing how it applies, the encouragement to bring the feedback back to the community and share that, and I'll show you how you can do that on the website, is really key. So basically, this is an invitation to be part of a worldwide research project in a way. Let me stop the share for a second. And let me just take a peek at any questions before we move into the next part. Let's see. So Kristen says the challenge is what other people's perceptions are. What are they holding us to? In forest school, are our kids learning math and reading? How do we do it to fit licensing standards? And these are super important questions, and I will show you the resource section on the website. There are actually a whole bunch of articles that have been written by and for school teachers in K-12 classrooms, people who've been experimenting with these principles and what they're finding and what challenges they're facing, but also how they're figuring out ways to do this. This work was actually born in a classroom. Dr. Bob Dickling tells a story in the book about how he was, I think it was an elementary school, and was noticing that these kids, their urge to learn and all of these pieces that they weren't being able to do, and then when they went outside or when they changed the structure, the difference over time. And so it is a lovely thing to think of, like I said, an immersive for multiple days. It's easier than do wild pedagogy, but the challenge that we've all got in front of us is saying, here's where I work, here's what I am doing, here are the communities I'm working with. How do I overlay this? How do I challenge myself even little bits and pieces to overlay these? All right, so do we have any other questions? It doesn't look like. Okay, I'm going to now show you the website, which is available to all of you all the time. And I would encourage, if you're interested, to dig more into this after the session. But because we have Zoom, if we'd been in person, I wouldn't be showing you the website. So I guess here's one little thing that we're doing differently today.
Hey, Deb, would you be willing to put the link in the chat box as well?
Yes, let me see if I can get my chat box to come back up. Okay, so let me tell you what the link is, wildpedagogies.com. And here it is. I just highlighted it on my screen if you want to. I can't get my chat box to come back to me. It must be behind things somehow.
I got it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Mysterious disappearing chat box. That sounds like a Nancy Drew mystery novel or something. So this website is very new, actually. A member of the cohort that I was in August kind of built this, and it's being added to as we go. I want to start by showing you the 6 touchstones, so we can look at those a little bit more deeply really quickly, and you can sort of see as you go to the 6 touchstones page, each one of them has more explanation. So you can read through all those, or if one of them resonated with you more deeply, you can go back and look at that. And also in the book, they're delved into many, many pages worth for each touchstone. And this is where for me the rubber hit the road, because philosophically I was reading about this in the introductory sections and thought, okay, I've been doing place-based sense-of-place education for a lot of years. This is the foundation of what I believe. But when I started digging into the touchstones was when I started finding places where can I challenge myself as an educator so that I can grow and make whatever change I can towards renegotiating education for the coming era. So that would be the little bit of homework assignment. I would say I would be curious, and please, if you want to chat more about this, I'll give you my email address at the end. But I would love to know, where do you find places that you want to challenge yourself as an educator? Where do you feel your boundaries getting stretched? You know, for me, I already mentioned the complexity and the unknown and letting go of control. The last paragraph here, Wild Pedagogies challenges ideas of control in education by embracing complexity, inviting risk, and allowing for emergence. There's some challenges for me there. Inviting risk is not a comfortable thing for me. So I have to ask myself, what does that mean? And where is the edge that is far enough but not too far? Because we don't want our people falling off cliffs. I mean, obviously, right? We don't want to turn it into type 2 fun. We're not talking about that. Where can it go for that? I've met with some folks who locating the wild was the hard part. They had set up a really big duality in their mind that wildness was wilderness or parks and trails. It wasn't downtown in a city, and it wasn't, in the middle of a concrete jungle where it's all asphalt and there's no dirt. There still may well be that dandelion growing up in the crack in that asphalt. There still is the ants that find their way between the building and the edge of the parking lot, and that's where they live. So having to challenge what wild meant. So each one of these things, I know the one that I'm thinking of now is, what is my role in sociocultural change? What is my role as a white woman from Colorado? What can I contribute here? Where does my voice, what does my work need to look like? I don't know those answers, but this is a place where it's feeling really juicy to me right now to challenge myself as an environmental educator so that I don't become a stagnant. That's a fun section to look at. The other section I really want to show you is the publication section. This is where a lot of your questions, you'll find there are several articles that have been published in academic journals and educational magazines about wild pedagogies, and all of them are available here with hyperlinks. So you don't have to have subscriptions to their journals or journal databases or anything like that. You can go here and just download these journals or these articles. And I would recommend all of them. I've read them all. It's pretty amazing stuff. And some of them do touch at like Kristen's question about teaching and the expectations that are placed on us. Because unless we're working 100% for ourselves, and even then, there are going to be expectations on what we're doing and why. We've got grants that we have to support the goals for. We've got taxpayers that are funding our positions. We've got participants that are coming for with an expectation for what we're offering. And so we've always got those constraints, but these articles are very helpful. And then this book, which is, it's not a terribly long read, but you can see I've got sticky notes and all sorts of things. It's highlighted and written, and I'm probably going to need another copy because I'm about to not be able to read this one anymore because, but I would very much recommend grabbing yourself a copy of that if you're interested. It right now is the most comprehensive explanation that goes far deeper than we could do in a short session here. And at the bottom, you'll see a coming soon section. There are several articles and things being worked on coming out of our August time in Norway, which should be coming out later this year, hopefully. And we'll continue to move this along. And the last piece of this website that I want to make sure you see is the Contact Us page. This is the page, and I can't stress this enough. This is where you say, hey, I have been really thinking about Touchstone number 4, and I've got some thoughts. Could I chat with somebody? Here's just what I'm thinking. Add that here and send it along, because if it's not something that the community is using and people are experimenting with and it's not growing, it becomes a stagnant piece of work, stuck in a little corner of a few people who thought it was cool, and it disappears, right? Instead of becoming a movement to really renegotiate education and really ask ourselves, where can environmental education go? And that takes each and every one of us in all of our settings with all of our experience, whether that's decades or days. And I can say too, when we met in Norway, there were people there with decades and people there who were brand new to the field of environmental ed, and having those voices together, it was a really interesting combination of things. So let me go back out of my share. Okay, good. Phew, back to what looks familiar. I'm always happy when that happens. So now I want to open it up if there are any specific questions, and I would say go ahead and put those in the chat, and then Nicole and I can decide if we need to bust into groups or answer those together. We've got about 20 minutes for questions. I'm also really curious if you have ideas about how this may or may not apply to your own work. Feel free to share those here, because anything that you're sharing here, there are other people on this call that could potentially benefit from your ideas, and the think tank can start now. Kristen put a note, you make me homesick every time you mention Norway, where I wanted to start my EE work. Would be interested in who you are working with over there. I was speaking with a group in Oslo. Aha, okay. So in Norway, there are a couple of universities that were involved in this, with individuals that came to this colloquium from those universities, and then a couple of independent scholars. And so I don't actually remember which the two universities. I can get back to you on that. But what I was really intrigued by is that in the Norwegian culture, there was a whole lot of deeply embedded pieces already into their educational programming. And it was a little bit more of a cultural norm, at least I could tell as an outsider. And the Norwegian folks that were on our trip were really talking about what a cultural norm the nature connection idea is, and integrated more into their school programming, which I thought was a really exciting thing that other countries could look towards, possibly learn from. All right, Martina, I wonder how this could be carried to public schools. That is a great question. Does anybody out there want to unmute, and do you have any thoughts on that, just from a very quick little Cliff Notes version of what this is? Let me.
Deb, what we're working with, I'm working with, wait a minute, you can't hear me probably.
Oh, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we're working with it's a nonprofit, but it's the Boulder Jewish Community Center, the Early Childhood Center there. And we have instituted pre-K for school. So, and that's where our challenges are coming in, because licensing is coming through and going, what is this and what are you doing? And then we have other teachers in other classrooms. What are you really teaching the kids, and all that. And so it's new this year. And I think maybe starting with the pre-K in public schools, because that's a little more open that way. Like up in Gilpin, we do have Montessori, and it has a pre-K Montessori and kindergarten, and then up to, they want to put in 6th grade. It goes up to 5th grade. They have a second classroom that goes up to 5th grade. So maybe that's a way to start integrating and getting it through, is starting more with the younger kids and seeing, so they can see that progression and see where that where they really are learning, where it, you know, it expands their, and they're not behind. And that's the big thing is, oh, they're going to be behind in kindergarten, they're not going to be able to pass the test to get into kindergarten. And it's like, that's the silliest thing I ever heard. I mean, I'm dealing with my grandson in Nevada. They're going to make him redo kindergarten. It's like, that's not what kindergarten's for.
Right.
So
yeah.
So
and that's a good point. Yeah, starting with young groups could be an interesting way. I will say, and put a plug in for the Colorado Environmental Education Plan, which I know there's a session later this afternoon on that very plan. The reason that plan exists also is to potentially help with these conversations of when you have, you know, administrators or parent groups or people saying, what are you doing, to be able to go to the plan, which is very rooted in place-based education. And so it can be very applicable to all the communities in Colorado. And then saying, here's a piece of it. And this is what I think about wild pedagogies that I find also exciting, is that each of those touchstones, you can touch into it at a very surface level, which might be appropriate for certain audiences, like potentially in a public school setting. You're not going to go into nature as co-teacher on a deep level of more than human communication encounters, perhaps. But you can take the spectrum of each of those touchstones and say, how can I engage with this? And where on this spectrum is it appropriate for me to do so? And I can tell you in my own career, I've worked in so many different settings where some of it's been, you know, government tax funded, some of it's been my own personal work where there is nobody telling me what I can do. And it all feels like the same content. It's how into each of those pieces. That's a great piece. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on any part of this so far? A lot to digest. Okay, so my question to you all then is to take a moment to think of those 6 touchstones, which, let's see if that whiteboard will actually let me have those again. Oh, yay, look at that. Of the 6 touchstones, take a second and ask yourself, which one are you feeling the most curious about right now? And then ask yourself why that is. And then we'll come back and hear from a couple of people. Or Nicole, do you think that's it? Do you want to throw into breakout groups for that? What do you think?
Sure, that might be a good question. I think it's a little less intimidating to bring everybody together in a couple. We've got about 43 people right now on the call, say around 40. We could do like groups of 8 or groups of
Sure.
5.
Yeah, I think, yeah, either of those are fine. And maybe, what do you think, 5 minutes, is that, and then we can come back and have a close. Is that easy to do?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Would you do me a favor really fast and just type in the question
Yes.
in the chat box?
I will
And
do
then
that.
in there, I'm going to put everybody in breakout rooms, and we'll give you guys a chance to chat with each other, and then I'll give you about 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning before it kicks you back to the main group.
Thank you for your flexibility there. That wasn't my plan, but this sounds like the perfect thing.
I feel like an expert now. I did it for the keynote, and I can do it now. So. And Deb, if you want, you can just go into one of the rooms, or if you want to leave a room, I can put you back into another one, however you'd like to do that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll just go into a room and then I can leave and bounce out and try to hit.
You need to. Okay, sounds good. All right, everybody, I'm going to break you out into rooms.
Oops, can you put me back into room 3? Sorry, never mind. I'll find my way. Oh, here we go. I got it.
Looks like a couple of our groups are still going, but they'll be kicked out in about 20 seconds, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks so much for doing that, Nicole.
Sure. Glad it worked.
You are like the Zoom goddess at this point.
I'm learning something new on every single one of these calls.
All right.
And we're down to our last probably 10 minutes or so, Deb.
Okay, we are close to finishing here. All right. Do we think we have people back who are coming? You know, we sometimes breakout rooms, I know, sometimes cause bathroom breaks too, which is cool.
I might hold on for just a second. Looks like we're down on our number of participants quite a bit.
Okay.
So they might still be. I know mine takes a while to put me back into the main.
Okay. We'll give it a second. If not, we'll assume that we lost some bio break folks.
Fair enough.
The Maslow's hierarchy of of sitting and looking at Zoom.
Exactly. All right, I would just go ahead. I think.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, that was really fun, and I'm super excited about the small snippet of conversations that I got to hear. And my challenge to all of you going forward, and I'm accepting this challenge as well, so this is not, I'm with you on this one, is to say, okay, with 6 touchstones, where can I focus in the short term, challenge myself as an educator? And I can say this is a philosophy I think I'm going to carry till the end of my life. I feel like I want to be at the end of my career, whenever that is, and saying I never stopped growing. I never stopped pushing the edges of my own capacity, but also the field of environmental education, because environmental education, I think, is a field that is oozing with potential. And it's up to each one of us to push each of those edges and to stretch a little bit more into what is wild and what is spontaneous, a little bit more into the more than human voice as our co-teacher, a little bit more into the socio-cultural change, and just saying, what can this be? How does it respond and react and create the cultures in which we all live? And how do we stop ourselves from becoming isolated and small in the work that we do? And I know that's easy to do. There are things I've done for years. I can fall back on those, and it's great to have those in the toolbox. You know, if the group is restless and the weather's coming in, you're like, okay, I know what we can do right now. Where can we keep pushing? And I would love to, I definitely invite any further conversation, and I'm going to type my email address here. If you want to chat further, Wild Pedagogy-esque, make sure that comes out right. Yeah, yes. I'm always happy to chat further. And let me just take a quick second and see if there's any last questions that we need to address. I think we are there. If you put a question in that we missed, please feel free to email me and hop on the phone and chat. But any last comments? Okay, thank you so very much, everybody. Oh wait, 2 new messages. Hold on. Okay. Okay, some groups reporting out what they talked about in their groups. And I would also encourage you, as you're going through today, if you're finding interest and you've connected with somebody, you know, stay in touch with each other too. Let this networking happen and let your ideas germinate. You know, even though we're not going to be able to walk into the dining hall or take a hike outside, we will be able to do that in September. So think about this, germinate this idea. We've got 6 months to be super creative and then come together in person, and then we can explode this topic all over the place if you want to. So that is the challenge going forward. And thanks for spending the time. It was really fun. And I wish you all to be well and safe. And remember how incredibly important environmental education is now and always. And I'm just so honored to be in a group of people. I'm going to tear up doing this kind of work. Truly, honestly, it warms my heart constantly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Deb, for taking the time to adapt your session for us. And I am looking forward to seeing what we can do in September. Save the date, September 13th and 14th. Snow Mountain Ranch. I truly believe we're going to be there and we're going to get to hang out in person. If you get a chance, please go to the virtual PD day on CAEE's website to complete the really short little survey. Let us know how this went. The link's also in the chat on the side. And we are going to be taking our lunch break now, and our schedule is going to come back. We're coming back at 1 o'clock. We've got 2 great sessions. Like Deb mentioned, the revising the EE plan. So a chance for you to actually give your feedback on how that plan can look going forward with its newest revision. And then another session by Matthew Jones called Queerness in EE, which also promises to be fantastic. So thank you guys for joining us. Enjoy your lunch. Take care of yourselves. And Deb, thank you again so very much. And we'll see you hopefully after lunch, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. And hey, Deb.
Yes.
I will go ahead and I'm going to officially end the meeting here in just a minute once I've copied everything I need to. And then I'll just re-log in again after lunch.
Okay, thank you so much for your help. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, that worked really well. And I was able to change my name and hopefully not mess things up too much on your end. And
look good. Yeah.
I need to play to see if maybe I can change the picture so when I go off camera.
It's not looking like me. I noticed that. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I don't want to mess up your profile, so.
Oh, I can always fix it back. That'll be good learning for me because I have very little knowledge about Zoom till, you know, so.
Maybe I'll try it right now just to see if, if it changes to.
Oh, that's funny. You can stay on if you want, and I can see what it.
Sure, give me just 1 second. I'm going to try just the CAEE logo and see.
Okay. Back here. My desk back here.
So let's see what happens. So there I go to CAEE. What happens if you go to your and turn your video off?
Okay, let's see.
Oh.
Oh, interesting. So I just get my name and you get my picture.
I think it's probably because I logged on before you.
Oh. Well, would it be helpful if I get in and log on a little before 1 o'clock, or would that probably make any difference then?
I think if you
You're
log
logging in.
yeah, I think if you log on before me, then I don't have access to the breakout rooms.
And right now, this system probably doesn't realize that this Deb Matlock is the person who has the account.
Right.
I'm just another person on the attendee. Okay.
But I wonder if you click on your 3 dots up at the top, where it says your name, can you change your picture?
It looks like I can rename. It doesn't say about hide self view, hide non-participant, rename. No, there's no picture option.
So I would bet that when you log in, if you logged in before me after lunch, it would have a picture of CAEE's logo there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
which I shouldn't. Okay.
I'll just log in at 12:45, and then if you log in after 12:45.
Okay.